My name is Lorne Phelps. I'm a partner development manager with Palo Software across North and South America. I'd like to have the panelists introduce themselves if they would. So Erick, I'll go ahead and give it to you.
Sure. Hi, everyone. My name is Erick Straghalis. I'm the president and chief strategist for StitchDX. We are a digital workplace implementation organization. We actually work primarily in SharePoint and Microsoft Teams, the Microsoft 365 environment. And we also partner with Palo Software on IntraNET and Microsoft Teams implementations.
All right, Erick, thank you. Selene, welcome. Would you also introduce yourself?
Sure. Hi, thanks for having me. I'm Selene de la Cruz. I'm Director of Content Design and Strategy at Mastercard. So I'm working on various service and products that are influencing the way people transact and interact across the globe. Right now I'm leading up content design for our digital identity service. But I also do work on, while I'm not specifically charged with internal communications, I also work on several internal objectives and projects, including our customer experience and design guild, working on things like team values and updating our style guides and our content pattern library and the elements that we're using to communicate both internally and externally.
Fantastic, Selene. Thank you for that. Welcome again to the panel. It's great to have you with us today. Bassam, please introduce yourself as well.
Thank you. I'm Bassam Alqassar. I'm the Vice President of ISIT, a company organization named Princess House. Princess House is a 58 years old, young organization, sells product around healthy cooking lifestyle. We have engaged with a project with both PAL and StitchDX on creating a collaboration platform, a digital workplace for our employees, and we'd love to share our experience with you.
Excellent, Bassam. Thank you for that. It's great to have you. So first question maybe to the panel, maybe Selene, if you don't mind, I'll go ahead and start with you. I'm curious, what's the current state of your office? Are you remote? Are you hybrid? Are all employees in? What's the current status today? And then maybe what's the plan 3, 6, 9 months from now?
Mm-hmm. So I think our plans are kind of always evolving as more information is coming to light. But right now we are in a hybrid environment with the option for most employees to go into the office. So myself, I'm working fully remote at this time, but I have been able to go in a couple of days as made sense for me. So the office is open. We actually just in New York City had a new office where I'm based open up, a entirely new building. So that's pretty great. But in other parts of the world, the offices cannot be open at this time. So we're very much hybrid. And myself, I'm working mostly with teams that are across the ocean. So generally working in a sort of remote capacity at all times. Yeah.
Got it. Thank you, Selene. Bassam, how about for yourself as well?
Yeah, since the pandemic, to be honest with you, we shifted to a more of a virtual environment. Like I said, we're a traditional organization that did not really have the remote work force. And the pandemic forced us into adapting to the hybrid model, if you call it. And the decision is really we took to downsize our office space to go a smaller office, and we're completely virtual with an option if you choose to be in the office with a smaller office.
Fantastic. Erick, how about you? What's your plan and path forward for your team?
We had an office. Our lease was up in I believe April. We went virtual in March, and we never re-signed our lease. So we were actually kind of lucky in the sense that we didn't have to carry that burden of having to have that overhead, and so we are all virtual. Completely virtual.
Excellent. I think we're seeing that a lot. Certainly it's resonating here. It wasn't a surprise, but I just wanted to level set. My expectation was that most people would be, in that remote kind of status. I think it was even this week, we saw that Apple announced, I think they're going to wait until the October timeframe, right before their employees come back. So that being said, maybe Selene, kind of back to you. What were some of the challenges that, Mastercard faced? regarding maybe engaging employees and supporting remote employees? What were some of those challenges? What did that look like?
Mhm. I think a lot of our challenges really center around the fact that because we are dealing with a lot of sensitive information, we do have pretty strict security protocols. So a lot of the collaborative tools that might be available for, a more, maybe I'll say nimble workplace are not available to us. And we are kind of working through now to get those security protocols in place for these more collaborative tools. But we did have to kind of set up these new ways of working. How can we be collaborative? How can we run workshops with people who aren't in the same room? So we've really had to kind of fall back onto tools, things like we use Mural, we use Freehand in Vision. Of course, we started the pandemic. It's hard to kind of remember now even, but we were mostly like a Skype-based company, and we've slowly been moving fully onto Teams and Zoom, which have been great. Teams, especially for doing things like file sharing and version control. So yeah, we did have to make a lot of these changes pretty quickly, but I feel like we're really kind of hitting our stride now with these new tools.
Excellent. Eric, what about you? What are you seeing?
Well, I tell you that we work with a lot of organizations, and Bassam can attest to this too, but we work with a lot of organizations, and one of the first questions that we ask is, how do you work, right? It's funny that we started the conversation, actually, Lorne, by you asking, where are people working? I think the reality is that it doesn't really matter where you work now. And I think that's been proven. I think what's really more
Agreed.
important is, how do you work? And understanding those processes and the changing sort of culture too that a lot of organizations are up against around remote work and what that's going to look like in the future. So we spent a lot of time talking about how people work and the sort of workflows that they have and the processes that they have, and how can we now think about tools like Teams and SharePoint and even Zoom. How do we leverage those tools better to optimize that workflow now that we're not all sitting in the same room? How do we optimize passing files around? Don't send them out through email, please. There are workflows that we can leverage that will enable people to get access to that one file in one place. And to Selene's point, the idea around security and version control and not having multiple copies of things floating around everywhere, that's become a real problem that we've come across with lots of organizations. So those are the types of things that we're helping them work through, and through sort of big discovery processes, coming up with solutions that are leveraging those tools that have enabled us to work remotely.
Excellent. Bassam, how about your experience?
Well, I'll be honest with you, from our experience, I can categorize it in kind of two areas that affected us. One is the social interaction, the social, part of this. And the second one, the technology adoption. So I'll speak on both of them. The social one, I mean, like we said, we're a traditional organization. We're a small organization, about 200 employees. It's very common in our organization, prior, even until now, we call it the PH family. So when somebody joins our work, so welcome to the PH family. We're family. So having the physical space and the daily interaction, that was really part of our culture, to have interaction. When we went virtual, that was really a big change for us, where now all of a sudden we have to interact through technology. Now, our technology adoption, our workforce, it's not uncommon to find in our employees, every 10-year year, someone in 35, 40 years, they've been in the organization.
Wow.
Okay. We do have a newcomers. So the interaction with technology for people who live I know people call it the generation X generation, the millennium. I really do say, okay, did you grow up with the internet? You did not grow up with the technology internet. The way how they interact with technology is completely different. They're two different, aspects. And we're more on the traditional, so that technology adaptation. But be honest with you, the resiliency of the people and how the pandemic really put us in this place really was very impressive to see people really adapt to these technologies. So we have these Teams technology and collaboration technology. We had them for 4 years in the organization, but only handful of people were using it. And then all of a sudden we go to virtual, we're forced to use it. And that was really a challenge for us in the beginning. And it still continue to be a challenge.
Excellent answer, Bassam. No, I completely agree. I think, the pandemic has certainly taught us that employees can be nimble. To Erick's point, you can have that work from anywhere experience, right? And we're seeing, again, a lot of kind of hoteling, if you will. Look at, if I pick on, Erick at Stitch DX, they've closed their office. You don't need it, right? You can still, if you have the right solution in place, you can still have that blended experience, if you will. So maybe with that being said, Bassam, follow-up question to you. How are you bridging the gap between maybe the physical office and the home office? What is that starting to look like from your perspective?
That's a great question. We talk about what we call the PH culture. And we felt, as soon as we closed the office and went virtual, we felt there is something missing here. Our PH culture is diminishing because, again, the physical platform that we had, we lost. And that's being replaced by the digital platform. So we tried in the beginning by having Zoom meetings, one-on-one coffee meeting, encourage people to get together and have all that. But we felt there's something missing. And what's really missing, that's what really led us to POW as well as Stitch DX. Somewhere we felt we really need to create a digital platform where it's a single place that will provide optimal experience that people want to do. And Erick calls it, I love the term, most lovable, product, the MLP. And really, I love that term because a lot of people, I've been in IT 35 years. And we see I see an organization, we spend a lot of time on creating digital platform for for consumer, for our customers. And we do these personas and we make sure we focus on the experience. When it comes to build systems within the organization, we always focus on the process, not the end user. Okay. That's really where was an eye-opening for us. And I continue to say, we really need to focus on the user experience more than the actual technology itself to build that culture back up. Systems, platform that people wants to use, platform that they love to use, not they must use to do their job.
Excellent, Bassam. Thank you. Erick, I guess talk to me about MLP. What does it look like?
Yeah, the concept of, I'll tell you, I have a background in marketing and also organizational development. So this was a process that we developed really coming out of an experience that we had where, we would go through the process of going through discovery and identifying the requirements and then basically saying, okay, here's a solution for you. And the reality is that, when you kind of go with MVP or minimally viable product, which is typically what you do when you're launching a new solution, you're checking boxes, but you're not really creating the experience. And Selene, probably in a design capacity, understands this better than most of us, that if you want people to actually use the solution that you're creating, or you want people to really feel invested in it, you have to start with understanding what they need and what they want. So going back to what I originally said, the first question we ask is, how do you work? How do your people work? What are the things that they're doing, or what do they need in order to do their jobs? And frankly, that's changed, right? In some respects now. So we need to adapt. We need to adapt some of the processes, and we need to adapt some of the expectations. And so going back and saying, okay, here are the needs that the end users have. Here are the tools and the functionalities that we have at our disposal. How do we map these together to be able to help the end user, get to that final step as quickly and as seamlessly as possible? And so the MLP is really about delivering high value in a very short period of time, creating that buy-in from the end user so that you can create a roadmap that says, okay, once we have developed this MLP, this minimally lovable product, people will want to use it. You create a little bit of FOMO, right? That fear of missing out, and people want to start using it more and have ideas that they will bring to, the IT department or to the comms department and say, hey, I want to be able to use this platform for this, or I want to be able to, do an a virtual meeting with lots of stakeholders, and whatever it is that they want to do, we can start to develop solutions for that. But they're bought in, they're more likely to use it, and it shows that value very quickly.
Excellent response, Eric, and thank you for that. I'm going to pivot a little bit. We've actually got a couple of questions that have come through, so I'm going to give it to anyone in the panel at this point. It's a very good question. And the first question is, how do you overcome employee resistance to a new solution?
I'll comment. It sometimes is not that easy, but I'll be honest with you, the best way to overcome it is to give them what they need, in my opinion. Not what you think they need. This is where, again, what Eric's talking about, and Selene. I have a lot of techies in my departments, and when I first started the relationship with Eric, it's like, yeah, we know everything to know about team and how to do this and how to do that in SharePoint, but they cannot unlock how you can make it useful. You really need somebody that really understands it from user's perspective. It's almost like your right brain, left brain side. We techies, we know how the things works, how to make it work, but you need to complement it. So the way you overcome this is put a solution together that takes techies, not just techies only, takes people like Selene's experience, people that will really worry about the user experience. User experience, we put a lot of emphasis when we're dealing with external application to our customer. That's an e-commerce with its platform. But unfortunately, we don't put a lot of that for the user experience when it's for our internal employees.
So to sum up, Bassam, you're putting the employee at the center of that experience, correct?
Absolutely. The user experience is the key for any application that needs to be used or anything. You give them good experience, yes. Does that mean it works 100%? Yes. No. Sometimes even you give them good experience, let's be honest, but at least I think that's your best path to success, in my opinion.
Selene, same question to you. Is that a similar experience at Mastercard? You put the employee at the center of the experience?
I think so. I mean, I think it's a lot of change management, and there is always going to be a little bit of trepidation as people are being asked to start using a new tool. And it's, kind of half about communicating what are going to be the benefits of working in this new way. And then you want to have people that kind of come in and be your trailblazers. So you have people who are working from the inside to help bring everyone else along. So that's something we did when we were bringing on teams. We had a channel for Ask the Experts. And so we had designated a few people who were going to be these early adopters who were going to be able to be your go-to if you had any questions. And they were just other internal employees, but they were acting as these kind of brand ambassadors for teams. And so I think it helped kind of create a more level of comfort for people to say, I'm confused, I shared a file, I don't know where it went, or how do I make a meeting, or how do I start a call? But it was, a less maybe painful experience, or less of a hurdle than calling IT or having to send an email just to put it directly in that chat. And at the same time, you're kind of learning by doing, because you're using the tool to ask questions about the tool. So I thought that was a pretty smart way that they drove that. We also recently switched to a new user testing tool, and we've been lucky. We're using Wevo now, and they've been very supportive, but we've not only kind of done a show and tell with them, but we've also asked them to here's a test that we had set up in our former platform. Can you walk us through exactly how you would recreate that in your platform? So it's taking something that's very relevant to the work that we're doing and showing how it would work with this new tool. So I think both of those kind of leading by example is the way to do.
Selene, thank you. I love your answer around brand ambassadors, right? And I agree. If you bring, again, the employees are part of that experience, right? So they can certainly help drive adoption. I mean, Eric, I'm thinking out loud. Is it safe to say that, there isn't necessarily one individual who owns, that effort of, that employee resistance, right? Because now if the employee is the center of the experience and you've got brand ambassadors across the organization, right? I think that's how you can confidently kind of drive adoption, right? And consumption, and giving and giving employees what they need, where they need it, when they need it. Is that accurate? You know, in your experience?
Absolutely. I'll tell you. So the reality is that even, and Bassam, I'm sure, can attest to this, IT is, IT resources are very constrained right now, and they're spread super thin. Why? Because no one's in the office, everyone's out, and everyone's using technology. And we've all been using technology and relying very heavily on technology since, for 18 months, nonstop. So I have a lot of respect for Bassam and the people that work with Bassam and all the people in IT right now, because that they're already strained. So the idea that adding new layers of technology on top of the technology that you're already using to get work done isn't the answer. And IT can't own that. And so, frankly, shameless plug here, but one of the reasons why we work with Powell and why we like working with Powell is that it actually sort of democratizes the ability for the organization, the employees, the workers, to be able to leverage the tools on their own without having to go to IT or go to comms, to create content or to share something or to create a team. It's enabling those groups to be able to leverage those tools on their own within the sort of parameters, the guideposts that are set up by IT, by marketing, by communications, by the executive team. So, I think it's everyone's responsibility. If you're working in a remote work, you're working in a hybrid work, you're working anywhere in 2021, and you're not, on a factory floor, you can work remotely. It's your responsibility to be able to leverage the right tools. The same as if you were in an office and you were handed tools to do your job, that's part of your job to master that. So I think it's not up to IT, it's not up to comms, it's not up to marketing, it's up to everyone. And having a really strong team, to Bassam's point, that can come together to make that happen, I think is really critical.
Agreed. Nice answer, Eric. Well said. We've got another question that's coming through live, so we're going to go ahead and we're going to take these as they come in to the best of our ability. One of the key challenges we see is finding the documents or resources I need. How do you address that challenge? And again, I'll give this to the group here.
I can speak to this a bit. I mean, I consider this question maybe a problem with your information architecture. And so as someone who works product side, something that we look to improve our experiences is looking at customer support queries. So I think if you're kind of tracking the questions that are coming in and understanding, where were people kind of falling short? What were they looking for? And how long did it take them to find it? When did they have to reach out and ask for help to find that document? That can kind of give you a clue as to perhaps the content on your page or the labeling or your navigation isn't really working. So I would take that as user feedback to kind of construct maybe a new navigation or however you're labeling these items to help people find them more easily.
Bassam, your thoughts?
I'll definitely echo that. I mean, there's a lot of great tools. I mean, for us, we really adapted the team as well as the Powell, their search capability. We were impressed with their search capabilities as well as the templates they provided. That is definitely creating a unified experience where to find information. Absolutely. That is something we still working toward, to be honest with you, because we are an organization traditionally relied on file share and share drive, network drive. And really the premise is really we want to move to that centralized where people can find information. Because again, that physical space where you can walk to somebody's desk and where can I find this? That platform is gone. So you need to replace that. How do I find this? So how do I find this? Yes, organization, architecture, how you organize your sharing, you simplify it, good searching tools, absolutely. That's really what I would tackle.
Got it.
Yeah.
Good answer. Eric, go ahead. if you have
I
something
totally
to say.
agree. And what I would add to that is it's funny that we've decentralized the workplace, but decentralizing the workplace now means that we have to centralize our data so that it's accessible by everyone wherever they are. The problem with that is when you move to a centralized system, and in a lot of cases we already had that, but we were so reliant on things like email to send things around, you'd end up with all these duplicative files everywhere. And then I've got a copy of it on my machine, but it may not be the latest version and it's been updated somewhere else. And so how do you know, what's the latest, what's the greatest, what should I be using? Salespeople run into this all the time. They don't have the latest, greatest, sell sheet or whatever it is. And it causes a lot of problems. So centralizing that data is really important. But to Selene's point, if you don't have a good IA, then it really doesn't matter, right? Because you might never find it again, even if you saved it in there. So having a good IA, understanding how to categorize content, having a really good search functionality that enables everyone to be able to find those things is really important. And again, democratizing access to these things, but also being able to set that security, right? So there might be some things that you don't want people to access, and knowing where things should go. So some things should be in Teams, not everything should be in the intranet, and understanding, the strategies that you have around, where do you go for each of those things, and having those sort of SOPs established is really important as well.
A good point. And it's also, I think, worth calling out that for organizations maybe that are thinking of solving for this now, as we continue in this hybrid world, I think there's a number of good call outs that you've just mentioned. So Eric, maybe what would be, in your estimation, some of the things that an organization should consider, right? If they're thinking about solving for this new hybrid world and kind of bridging the gap between, again, the physical office, right, and the home office, what should someone consider?
Yeah. I mean, the first is, I think everyone at this point has some kind of collaboration tool, whether it's, Zoom or it's Teams. And the reality is that those have some limitations, right? You can share documents, you can share files, but if you don't have a really strong strategy on how you're going to leverage that, I mean, the reality is that, all of these organizations, Microsoft, Zoom, all of these platforms were releasing new features and new functionalities literally every month, in some cases on a weekly basis. And so there were so many tools at their disposal, as organizations' disposal. They didn't know how to use them, and they still don't. A lot of organizations are still trying to understand, how do we actually optimize the usage of Microsoft Teams? And the reality is that because it's a platform, it's got a tremendous amount of flexibility. And so I'll go back to what I originally said. How do you work? Start there, understand how you work, and then come back to the tools and say, how do the tools fit how we work? And if they don't fit how we work, how do we need to adapt to fit the tools that we have at our disposal? And being able to do those two things, I think, is kind of a critical aspect of that.
Bassam, your thoughts to Eric's point?
Absolutely. I think Eric did a good job on covering all that. Again, you really have to have some rules. You need to have to follow some guidelines and on how to establish that. And again, but I really am truly a true believer is, if you're a successful business today and you interact with end consumer, you've done it already. Your customer does not struggle to find the information. If your customer struggles to find the information they need to do business with you, you're not going to be successful in business. We all know that. You need to treat it the same way, with your employees. So my advice, try to take that experience where you learn, same thing you treat it for your customer. Take care of the people who take care of your external customers as well, in my opinion.
Good point, Bassam. Selene, your thoughts to Bassam's point?
Sure. I mean, I think a lot of what we do, kind of to what I was speaking to earlier, is doing a lot of consumer listening and understanding, what is the language that they're using. So I would say the same goes for internal communications. How are they calling these things when they're searching? What are they searching for? And using that to create your structure. And we actually do, internally, we all kind of agreed upon like a file naming nomenclature so that we could understand what is the most updated file, down to like, who was the last person to update it? What was the date? what was the time, what kind of time format are we going to use given that we are a global company? So these were kind of standards that we did agree upon. Is everyone doing that perfectly? Probably not. But we strive and we try, and yeah, that's kind of just how we've been moving forward, I guess.
I mean, for a big global organization, I think that you've taken the time to kind of think through that. That's a big first step right in the right direction. So I certainly applaud you in that effort. What about, it sounds like we're all kind of in agreement, right? A digital solution can really help the employee experience. Bassam, I know that you're kind of starting down that path. Talk to me about, your thoughts thus far and maybe your thoughts you look, for the next 6, 12, 18 months.
I really would love to see us really move more and more into that collaboration. We're building the IntraNET around Teams with which we're very close to launch that. A place where people can find a unified place to find information, to have an interaction, help in building that culture back, with us. And I just want to bring, I know we were talking about adoption, how you drive adoption. I remember the discussion when we first kicked this project off in the exec team, which is I'm part of, and our CEO. And when we presented this project, and everybody was like, it's a change. So everybody, of course, they're gonna reject that change because it needs to take some dedication, and it needs work, and it needs to take people out of their, what they do today. And my message was, what convinced my peers and my CEO. I said, okay, you're an organization, average tenure 35, 40. We already see our newcomers. And these newcomers, this is how they work in the digital world. They grew up in the digital world. To be competitive, to recruit talent, you need to do something. If you don't start doing it now, then it's when. So the urgency is there, in my opinion, because the workforce is changing. Okay, that's definitely, and we see that in our organization. A lot of these people have been there 40-something years. They're retiring, and we got a lot of great people, coming in, and they work differently. They interact differently, and these platforms. So I really would like to see us, where we can meet that new talents. How can we really serve that new talent and continue building that culture, continue building that, what we call the PH family.
I love that, Bassam, you're talking about culture, right? Because typically when we went hybrid, that's one of the impacts that organizations felt. So I love that you're bringing that in as part of the experience. I mean, Erick, are you seeing that as well across, organizations that you're working with currently? Are they also focusing on culture and the importance of that?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's hard for some organizations, and maybe, I'm be very curious to hear Selene's response to this from Mastercard. But, the organizations we work with, and some of them are huge, some of them are small, but everyone still believes that culture is really important. I think that's been established, over the last decade or so. Organizational culture is really important. The challenge, I think, is that we've tied organizational culture so much to the physical space. We've created like open seating and we've knocked down walls because we don't want to have barriers, and we want everybody to be able to come together, and even foosball tables and ping pong tables and free coffee, and like all of these things have become a part of culture. It's not culture, but it's become a part of the culture, and in a lot of ways it's enabled culture, right? It's enabled us to create culture amongst our employees. Well, what happens when that's gone and you don't have that physical space anymore? Now you have to rely on the digital workplace to replace that. And it's not the same. I mean, there's just no replacing it, right? You just can't replace that. But you can find ways to help people get back into the alignment. And this is where I think working with people, in internal comms and marketing and the executive team really, and HR too, is really important. Because I think for me, culture is less about, it's less about what you do and more about how you do it. So how are you actually living the values and the mission and the vision of the organization? How are you helping the rest of your colleagues live that out? How are you helping the organization meet those goals and objectives? And so for me, it's a lot of communication and helping people come back together virtually, and even in some cases in small groups in person, where maybe they're not going into the office, maybe they're meeting outside the office, maybe they're gathering in smaller groups at co-working spaces near their homes, or they're gathering at a bar or a restaurant to be able to just have a little bit of camaraderie. There's lots and lots of things that can happen to help drive that culture, but ultimately it's about aligning the employees' values and personal mission and vision of their job with the mission and vision of the organization. And so communication becomes a really important part of that.
Well said. Selene, would you agree with kind of Erick's points around culture?
Yeah, I do agree. I mean, I think it's been such an interesting transition and something that we're still figuring out. Something that kind of comes to mind for me, because I do work, my main product team is based in Dublin. So initially I was like, my day-to-day hasn't really changed. I'm still kind of working here, myself based in New York, and then partnering, doing meetings with people who are across the ocean. But it kind of quickly became clear to me, I used to sit with other content designers on either side of me. So I would come in the morning, say hi. If I'm not talking to one of them, maybe they're talking over me to each other, and I'm jumping in and joining that conversation. And I think I had to kind of take a moment and give myself space to say, it's still important to connect with people like that. So even though there's the Zoom fatigue and no one wants to be stuck in front of the screen more than they need to, just taking like those first 5 minutes of the meeting to have that kind of quick catch up and like banter, it is very important. So we're not just kind of, I don't know, robots on Zoom. And I've also been kind of interested to see the different channels that people choose to communicate depending on kind of the formality of that communication. So I have teammates who will be pinging me on Teams about one thing, but then also like side texting me about something that's like maybe a little more personal, like throwing a jab at something that someone's saying in the meeting. And so I think kind of just opening everyone up to those different channels, like with my team in Dublin, we have our chat on Teams that we have just for ourselves. Then we have a channel that is more shared with our product partners. And then we also have like a group WhatsApp where we're sending pictures of like, here's what I did this weekend. So I think that these different channels can kind of, I don't know, encourage like maybe a less formal way of communicating that can help build that culture.
I think that's a great point. I've worked remote for some time, and I miss those kind of social moments, the water cooler moments, right? Catching up as you're, walking away from a meeting. I think the same can be said of those individuals who maybe are in a hybrid situation, right? Again, if there's people meeting in the office and someone is dialing in through Zoom or Teams, when that meeting ends, right, the person who's dialing in isn't privy to any additional conversation that goes there. So I think it's a really important consideration too. And I'm interested to hear the panel's thoughts on this to help ensure, right, that sense of inclusivity, whether you're in the office, whether you're out of the office, whether you're 2 days in, 3 days out, and then 3 days in, 2 days out, et cetera. I think inclusivity along with culture becomes really kind of key and critical. And to the panel, your thoughts on that.
I mean, I'll sort of say this. I think there's a real risk of FOMO, right? The fear of missing out. If you see that like the group is in the office and you're not, you're going to stand out. I mean, look, there's a lot of benefits to being in the office, but we also know that a significant number of people don't want to go back in. And there's just been this huge shifting sort of paradigm for everyone. And I think part of it is people have they've reevaluated their own personal priorities and their professional priorities. And, people I think are okay working from home. Not everyone, but I think a lot of people are. And so, being able to just accept, where everyone is and, being comfortable with how they're willing to work. And again, where you work is far less important than how you work. And so if there are teams that are able to create those dynamics and leverage those tools to enable those people that want to work from home and enable those people that want to be in the office to work from the office. And, if you're lucky enough and you can go and sit on a beach somewhere and get internet access and you can work from there, that's great. At the end of the day, it's really about, how you work and enabling those teams to work together.
Agreed. Bassam, your thoughts to Erick's comments?
I totally agree. And the same here. A lot of people since when we went virtual, they're really much happier working, remote, working, from, we hardly, be honest with us, very small number of people that go in the office these days, very minimal. And it doesn't really matter. I mean, when people participate for us, I don't see us, maybe I'm missing it. I don't see anybody looking up, oh, you're in the office, I'm not in the office, and vice versa. Maybe because we're not as often. Majority of we only have 2 specific teams that they usually in the office constantly, with rotation, our HR team and then the finance team, and our product development team. But from collaboration, be honest with you, I think people, they kind of get used to it. They'd rather do it, I would say 90% of people rather do work virtually because of the flexibility of it. And they can, attend to more of their personal life. Now, on the other hand, the other thing that complaint we hear is working virtually, working from home. It's kind of that clean line where when you come home and your work is not at home, you'll lose that. You bring in your work with you at home now. Mm-hmm. So it's very easy to access that, to go and look at your email, IT, we used to, that, be honest, all my life, I come in, I bring my laptop and, my wife, I sleep with my phone next to me. So she's used to that. But a lot of people, be honest, they would say like, wait a second, now my work is so accessible to me. So they find themselves spending more time on outside work hours. And for actually our HR team was smart enough to recognize that and I would make people aware, you need to break away. You need to put some boundaries, mm-hmm. And that's really that's one of the things that we experienced.
I think it's a great point. I mean, Bassam, I agree. I am constantly connected. I will respond to something 8, 9, 10 p.m. We are super connected in what we do. And to your point, even when I vacation, I do take my laptop, much to my wife's chagrin, but I do that. It's just, we are just so interconnected right now. I want to go back for a moment and I want to kind of talk about strategy, right? Again, putting the employee at the center of the experience. I mean, what does it look like or what should it look like? Should it be marketing, communications, and IT? I mean, Erick, your thoughts. If an organization, again, is thinking now in these terms, like maybe this is something I need to solve for, what advice would you perhaps provide?
So we do this a lot. And we work with organizations, and one of the things that we try and do is we try and get a good cross view of as many parts of the organization as we can. There's a balance. You don't want it to be designed by committee. That's never easy or good, and usually creates more hurdles. But you want to have at least some executive representation because you want everyone to know that this is important and it's going to be visible to the organization. So getting somebody from the executive level to say, hey, digital workplace is important to us and we need to be able to put time and energy and resources against this. I think having IT is critical because there's always issues of access and security and, being able to know, where things are held and data points, profile data points, things like that, really important. Plus, they're just the keepers of all of this data, so they need to be in the know. I think it's important to have HR involved because so much of things like IntraNET and communications are coming from HR. If you don't have an internal communications team, that's usually where it lives. But an internal comms team is always important, or marketing is also really important. And I think those kind of are the key pieces of this because so much of it is around communications, and then being able to bring the voice of the user in as we need them and being able to sort of create and develop personas around the end users, all the way down to if you've got a manufacturing plant, those factory floor workers that may not be sitting in front of a computer and may not have the ability to work remotely, but they're still a foundational, critical part of your organization. So understanding what they need and how do they get information from the organization, and how do they search for, HR policies, or, whatever it is they're looking for? How do we get them to be better aligned to the vision and the mission of the business? Though understanding that all the way right up to how does the executive team communicate with each other, and then how do they want to communicate out to the rest of the organization? So, you want to have good representation, but balance that out with an understanding that overrepresenting means sometimes you get blocked up.
Selene, your thoughts as well?
Yeah, something I really appreciated that they did at Mastercard was holding these kind of listening sessions at basically every level. So we had ones that were company-wide, globally available to everyone at the company, where they could ask a question to the executives. And I just felt like that was so important to engender trust at the very beginning, when there was a lot of changing and shifting going on. And then we kind of just laddered down from there to continue doing that, at a skip level, and then with your direct manager, and then with your teammates. And so everyone kind of had an opportunity to speak and ask questions and, I don't know, have their fears assuaged a little bit. So I thought that was really helpful.
I would agree. I mean, I love the openness of kind of that forum type approach where, again, you can engage in those conversations. I think it's certainly beneficial for all employees. Again, no one thought we would experience what we have experienced, and it was certainly challenging for all of us. But we've got another, and Selene, thank you for that. We've got another question in from the audience. Bassam, maybe I'm going to ask you to kind of think about this one. What about alignment around company brand and vision, right? How are you kind of ensuring that in a hybrid environment?
That's a great question. So I want to build on what Selena just mentioned. So part of what we do, and be honest with you, is really having the leadership team accessible to the entire organization, whether in the form of you can ask questions, or even, so we developing this. So one of the things that we committed to that is each one of our leadership on the exec level, they will provide an update about what's going on in their area. And these updates could be, they don't have to be business related only. And for example, my department is the first we volunteer to do that. We talked about all the fun things that we've been doing. We have a walking, we have a walking team, a hiking team that goes on the weekend and hike. We have some pictures to view. Again, I'm going to back culture, but it goes side to side by side. But when you start doing that, then becomes communicating also what's going on from the company, as an organization, as a brand. It really goes along with that, and you can really push these two messages nicely and give people a reason to go in and be interested. They want to go and say, hey, what Bassam looks like on the weekend, or hiking. And in the same time, they learn what project this IT team is working as well on. So really, it goes building the brand, or really building that personal relation, building that kind of connection. In my opinion, goes side by side.
Great point. And I want to, Eric, maybe pick on you a little bit. I love the point that Bassam made around kind of leadership updates, right? And one of the things that has really been brought to light in this, experience that we've had the last, 16, 17 months has been around ensuring that maybe some of that top-down messaging is actually being read, and it's actually being heard, and it's being seen. What are your thoughts around that?
Around how they're reading it, how they're communicating?
No, and how do you ensure that maybe those updates?
Yeah.
How do you help ensure that employees across the organization are seeing that?
Yeah, so there's ways that you can do that, right? There are ways that you can kind of add features to an intranet, where if they've got a news item, they have to scroll down to the bottom, they have to click, I read this. And I think that works for certain things. I think it works for like HR content, things that are important, that like you really are critical information. But I don't think you can force people to read news about, Bassam went fishing and this weekend. So everybody needs to read that. But there are ways to get analytic data behind that. So how many views on that news item, and that's actually important, because it's not to know who's reading it and who's not reading it, but to understand what's engaging content. And I'll tell you from my own experience working with lots of different organizations, the most engaging content is content that comes from colleagues and fellow employees. And it doesn't have to be, here's what I did this weekend. It could be things like, hey, we just won a new contract. And we're really excited about it. And here's what it means for our team. And here's what it means for our business. It could be, we volunteered at a soup kitchen, or we went and helped out. There was a disaster in our town, and we went and helped, people that were in need. Or there was a disaster, and there are people in our community, in our work community, that need help. So it's really about creating that content that's engaging and not necessarily about driving new business all the time, but about driving that sense of community and sense of belonging. I think to both Selene and Bassam's point around how do we create that sense of community. It's really about the content and the type of content that you're pushing out.
Love the fact that you picked on, kind of the engaging contact coming from the employees, and I would agree. I guess question to the panel, and we're almost running out of time. We've got about, looks like 8 minutes left, but question to the panel. Are you measuring employee engagement currently? And if so, how?
I can speak to that a little bit. With our customer experience and design guild that we run for kind of the practitioners and our allies. It's open to anyone who kind of wants to be a part of it. But we do look at like how many people are adopting the tools that we're using, how many people are coming to the meetings, how many people are engaging with the newsletter, to the points that you were mentioning, Eric, how many people are opening, how many people are reading. And then looking at other things too, like the work that we're kind of creating together. So we've built a new design system. How many people are using that design system? So we are measuring these things. Mm-hmm. And I'd say right now we're kind of more at the benchmarking stage, as a lot of these are newer initiatives, but yeah, we're kind of looking to grow and improve there.
Bassam, how about from a Princess House perspective?
Yeah, again, we are in the process of doing this new digital platform. We really have not started. I mean, we do it on a limited basis right now, like the traditional tools when we send a survey or an email. We use SurveyMonkey sometimes to do, so we measure engagement that way, but not through the elaborate. That's something definitely something we should definitely, and I believe we will be doing and measure, because again, to measure how effective is, what are you doing in your content, you do need absolutely to measure the engagement and adjust based on that, and make sure we do that.
Got it. Eric, your thoughts?
Yeah, so engagement is so critical, right? Because at the end of the day, you're investing time and energy and money into these platforms and into these tools. And the whole point of them, at the end of the day, is to drive productivity and drive efficiency. So if you're not seeing productivity and you're not seeing efficiencies, something's wrong, something's not working. So it is important to measure this. How you measure it, there's lots of different ways, to both Selene and Bassam's point, there are surveys, and you can go out and do IDIs, and lots of different ways that we can do polling. But I think the approach that we take in terms of what we call the MLP, the minimally lovable product, versus an MVP, is a big part of that. So creating that sense of sort of customer buy-in, right? The customer in this case is the employees, but creating that buy-in that at the very beginning helps us to drive a lot more engagement. And we can measure that through all, as I said, polls and surveys and all these things. We can also see usage and utilization is so critical right now, because again, you're spending money on Teams, you're spending money on SharePoint, literally, hundreds of dollars per user, sometimes thousands of dollars per user. And you want to see that value. And so establishing value from the very beginning on the tools and showing that value quickly to the end users will drive engagement naturally. And that's really the best way. If you're forcing people to use it, they'll go on there. And so you'll see utilization go up because you're telling them to go there. But that's not really utilization, right? So it's about getting people to go there on their own and want to go there on their own. So creating that lovable experience is really a foundation for engagement.
Excellent. Bassam, we're almost up to the hour. Maybe some final thoughts from your perspective.
Again, this digital platform that we all try to create is really about making happy employee. Happy employee is much more productive employee than an unhappy employee.
Yeah.
Completely agreed. Selene?
That's the ultimate goal. Absolutely.
I listen, and Eric was teasing it a little bit, an engaged employee not having a good experience may not be happy, may not be productive. So that employee experience, along with engagement, the two kind of do go hand in hand. Agreed, Bassam. A happy employee is a confident employee, is a highly engaged, is a highly productive, right? Selene, maybe some final thoughts for you as well?
Sure. I would just emphasize from a user-centric writing perspective, Eric, I love what you were saying about kind of creating this engaging content kind of coming from the employees. Maybe it's about their weekend. I would also emphasize just making things easy to read. You want to make it as easy for them as possible. So maybe something like a story about the team going hiking, that can be a bit of a longer format read. But if you want to communicate something that they need to know, then you're going to want to use like your headers, your subheaders, your bullets, use as few words as possible because your employees are busy people. And again, they want to get the information that they need and then they want to move on with their lives. So I would just look to kind of some UX writing and content design best practices to make your communications streamlined and easy to read.
Well said. Well said and agreed. Eric, any final thoughts for you as well?
Yeah, I have no end of thoughts here on the digital workplace. I'm a big fan. I think again, I'll come back to the idea that where you work is not as important anymore as how you work, and so I think organizations really need to spend time fundamentally understanding how their employees want to work and how they want to engage the content, their data, each other, and building those relationships with employees. I mean, one thing we haven't talked about that I think is really important is, there are a lot of people looking for work right now, partly because of the Great Resignation, right? Companies are forcing people to go back to the office. Some people don't want to, and they're looking for jobs because of that. And some companies are seeing that and saying, hey, you can work anywhere you want, so come work for us. And they're reaping the benefits of that. But I think the reality is that onboarding new people is going to be really difficult. It's one thing if I get on a phone, I get on a Teams call with somebody I've been working with for years, and we've got a good rapport already, and we've established that. But you're new to a company and you don't know anybody, and you got to now get on Zoom calls or Teams calls and meet with people. That's really hard. So I think it's really important for organizations now to understand how people want to work and setting those expectations early on as people are coming in new, and also establishing those new norms for how people are going to work together in a hybrid environment, and understanding that strategy is really as important as the technology, because if you don't put the technology to use in the right way, you're not going to get that buy-in. You're not going to get the utilization that you want. It's all tied together.
Excellent. Eric, appreciate your final thoughts to the panel. Selene, Bassam, Eric, truly enjoyed the insights. Love the dialogue that we've had here. I hope everyone that attended the session enjoyed as well. And with that, Anastasia, we'll give it back to you.
Thank you.